Hello potential viewers, welcome to my channel. Controversial and apparently super unlucky movie The Hunt, starring Betty Gilpin and Hilary Swank, was released not too long ago, but I did not get a chance to see it in the theaters. So I kinda had to stream it, even though I did not want to, given the ongoing pandemic. And with this week's news of the second-time Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders dropping out of the presidential race, bending his knees against to the Democratic establishment that placed so many artificial obstacles before him, I think it will be an interesting tie-in to my usually late movie analysis and the random thoughts on the current political climate. I find it quite interesting that apparently the movie's marketing strategy capitalized quite masterfully on almost the fullest extent on how the political sphere reacted to the trailers and the themes displayed, especially the right side of the aisle. And this is where I find the no fun aspect of the right wing very tiring and exhausting, even though I myself would put myself more on the right side of the political spectrum. The movie was pretty obviously going to be a sort of a battle royale / Hunger Games style political satire, just that in this case, the authoritarian and tyrannical villain appears not to be some right-wing, hyper-religious and patriarchal government and the machines entangled with it, but some obvious left-wing liberal elites, which is actually much closer to the actual recent history. And before I proceed to the main points of this video, spoiler alert, obviously, the movie showcased a bunch of liberal elites arranged a hunting ground somewhere in Croatia and rounded up 12 right-wing social media figures who are apparently keen on spreading conspiracy theories about them for them to hunt. The driving motive behind such a crazy plan was that 1 year ago, before the particular hunt, a private group chat of these liberal elites was leaked, and in the thread they were joking about the conspiracy about them rounding up people and hunting them down. This ended up making them losing their jobs, and as a revenge they arranged to make the conspiracy theory a reality and hunt those presumably prominent right-wing figures from the internet who had some roles in spreading a conspiracy theory. The heroine of the movie, played by Betty Gilpin, was a Mississippi woman with some military experience, and unlike other characters in the movie from both sides, she does not talk about anything political, although one can make assumptions about her political leaning based on her background. I don't think the movie was very much of a right-wing or conservative-leaning movie, even though the main heroine's political leanings can be speculated to be more probable to be on the right spectrum. Both sides of the political spectrum got satirized and lampooned, but one can definitely tell that the left is satirized more because the right-wingers displayed are clearly the underdogs in this situation, while the rich liberal elites can still sip wine and complain in their mansions after they lost their job. And I believe the reason that even though the controversy was kind of vicious and uncalled for, the reaction of the movie still gathering an okay reception. Rotten Tomatoes audience score is 66 at the time I recorded this video, is that it is a breath of fresh air in this day and age where everything is hyper-politicized. Now you might ask, why would a political satire become a breath of fresh air in our current over-politicized climate? To that I would answer, it is precisely because of it being an equal opportunity satire, where both sides of the political spectrum gets jokes about them and jokes for them. And what dissolves over politicization and useless political arguments than this kind of somewhat cynical and somewhat leave me alone attitude. And this is the attitude or political leaning displayed by the main character of the movie The Hunt. The only personal conviction she had was that whoever messes with her will feel her wrath, and she offered no opinion. And being the main character in the world of exaggerated political caricatures, she is clearly the one most people can relate to. And this attitude, I believe, is at the end of the day what most people can tolerate on some level, other than those church lady and shrieking SJW types that somehow tie their center of existence to the monitoring and meddling of other people's business. What does this have to do with the fall of Bernie Sanders, if you might ask? Let me break that down a bit, and what I would try to refrain from using some of the more commonly used talking points, and at the same time I would try to not overstretch my thoughts, even though this video is more or less of a rambling of random thoughts. The main reason I believe is that Bernie Sanders being a self-avowed socialist. And no, adding a Democratic prefix to the name does not help his branding at all. For quite long, Americans have grown a relatively healthy distaste for socialism, even though the popularity of the idea seemed to have grown for quite a bit among the young crowds. But still, the notion of having a socialist as president is still a really bad idea for many Americans, which is a really good thing. Normal people don't have to understand in perfect detail why cyanides kill. They just need to know that it does. And at the core of this distaste, in my humble opinion, is the desire to not to be told what to do and restrict the power of anyone who intends to impose their opinions and desired lifestyle upon others. While there may be some misconceptions about the specifics among the general public, i.e., the gross underestimate of how evil and corrupt the system will be in its implementation, the perception of them about the socialism is correct, that it is a fundamentally invasive and authoritarian ideology. It is pretty obvious if you take a look at the common causes championed by Bernie Sanders and the ultra-progressive types, the canceling of private healthcare, the nationalization of industries based on arbitrary standards of cruelty, and the call for people to tattle on their family, friends, and neighbors who have the audacity to utter their wrongthink. Socialism and many set of ideals revolving around it or in close adjacency to it are in many ways a wet dream for power-hungry opportunists. Bernie Sanders sure looked a lot like just one of them, but he had the inescapable flaw of being an old white man. All of this is of course under the fluff padding of extremely goodwill. Universal healthcare and single-payer system to prevent patients from being ripped off. Aggressive redistribution of wealth so that no one is poor, and trigger-happy woke police always ready to beat and cancel the hate speech out of the deplorables. Ideas that sound so good and heavenly that they can easily fool young students with no experience in society and highly educated elites but always end up in bloodbath and some kind of camp for those who disagree. And the democratic branding is not helping, like at all. China and North Korea both have people in their official country name. How about bring up democracy there? I am pretty blissfully unaware of the torturous treatments the democratic proponents and political dissidents have to endure in North Korea. But I am well aware that China is pretty unashamedly undemocratic and is actively promoting the propaganda that the concept of democracy and rule of law and constitution are concepts cooked up by the Western world to take over China in order to impose the colonial time world order upon Chinese people. And does this line of thinking strike some semblance to the political climate of today, especially on the left side of the spectrum? That any rebuke of their ideology and ever-morphing guidelines of non-problematic human behavior is in servitude to either the corporate oligarchs or that the institutional isms. And anything that is factually contradicting to the narrative is a grand conspiracy to undermine the cause. It's almost as institutionally tinfoil hat as it is cross-culturally and cross-geographically symbolic. This is where I think the support for Joe Biden, or in other words, the spite against Bernie Sanders, come from. Similar to the main heroine of The Hunt being a symbol of non-political, don't mess with me attitude. The Dem population's begrudging support for the senile hair-sniffing Joe is merely a sign of hope for normalcy. A time where they accepted the status quo but unwilling to have more of their life meddled with and controlled. Throughout the countless babblings and gaffes, the few quotes of not going to nationalize industries and throw out private healthcare are pleas sane enough to appeal to their inner desire to not getting their life legislated and regulated away. That would be all for my video today. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on my takes. I hope to see you next time.